All right, we are continuing with our creature composite. Assignment 2, Adobe section in the morning. We've done 6 videos so far. This was the playlist. I'm not sure where they're going in reverse order. They shouldn't be, but that's why I number them, so you can always play them in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the last thing we did was we were starting to use direct adjustments to color adjust and help to blend our layers together. And probably like many of you, I have not looked at mine since Wednesday's class. So it's always good on Monday to check the course outline. So we're going to be turning in something for assignment 2. And we're going to be discussing question of the day 2. And then we're going to be, at the end of class, introducing our first proving ground. And our proving ground is going to use both assignments 1 and 2 in whatever states they're in. And we're going to first cut out a clean image of our creature as a PNG asset to bring that into our fantasy landscape and then make it believably blend into that environment. So it's the figurative ground compositing technique, right? That kind of brings everything together. That's going to relate to lighting sources. That's going to relate to coloring, direct adjustments, dodging and burning. And we're going to learn texture overlays, which kind of bring it all together. And those can help your assignment 1 and your assignment 2. So I'm going to turn off the course outline for now. Today our focus is on assignment 2. And we have to find our project. So what do? We pull our folder from our documents folder where we keep them safe, the one furthest away from the trash can. And we pull it to the desktop as I have here. We can open it up. We can see where our progress is. This is also the folder that you duplicate onto your thumb drive so you can work on it outside of class. And I find my PSD file. I mark it green and I can right click and open it with Adobe Photoshop 2025. And I do have tablets open at the back. So now we look at our layers. So if you're deciding that the creature that you submitted, if I go to the class and I go to assignments, right, that's our shortcut to it. We scroll down to assignment 2 and where we post it. It's always a good idea to post your progress, especially since you're required to post a sketch like it's shown here in the past student example. So if I go to my post with my sketch, here it is. This was inspired by dodos and by porcupines and kind of bringing these elements together and rough cutting and placing them. So now it's about blending them and getting them to look a little bit more balanced. And I organized them, like the metaphor I used was like a car on a factory floor, right? So I have the head, and the head's all right here. So now I'm going to work on adjusting the colors and blending the elements of the head from the top layer down. So whereas with the landscape, we worked from the back forward, on creatures you work from what's nearest to you towards the back, right? Because the things that are on top are the things you see the most. So let's just go through this really quickly because you might get a lot of internal compositing. One layer is just the red of the eye, which I isolated, duplicated, and then saturated. Underneath that is the ring around the eye, which I took from another layer and moved it forward. Underneath that is this porcupine. And so that's now the layer I'm going to play with adjustments on. So I like to have a gray background. I don't worry about the outside edge quite yet. And the 3 direct adjustments we're going to use over and over again to help things blend, just like we did for our landscape, are first levels, so image adjustment levels. Play with the midtone slider. Either brighten or darken. Remember, this is far more technical than most studio classes, right? So instead of you showing you understand the requirements through creativity, you show it through like technical knowledge. And so in order to make the lights and the darks match, you need to be able to know how to use levels. So sometimes you just need to push it a little bit to get it to match. Sometimes you have to goose the shadows just a tiny bit, or goose the highlights, right? But what you don't want is for them to be used so much that they get blasted out. I did see this with some of the landscapes where pixels got erased, got replaced with pure white or pure black. So the safest one to use is this mid-tone slider. So I'm going to push it a little bit brighter. That's it. I could even limit it slightly if it's too bright, and maybe I'll limit the highlights with this slider just back a little bit. Next, after levels, the next one you need to know and know how to use and know what it does is color balance. So color balance is the temperature of the lighting. And so far we have this eye and this beak, and I'm judging what's the lighting. It looks pretty warm, but this looks kind of one-dimensional. So again, start with the midtones, and you just have to kind of push it back and forth. And actually, I need to push it a little bit more towards blue to get that diversity in the color temperature. Notice that as I push it towards blue in the midtones, the highlights are still pretty warm because those porcupine quills are actually kind of yellowish cream color. But I don't want all of it to be yellowish cream color like that, because then that doesn't have the full depth of the rest of my creature. So that's where kind of pushing and pulling at these color balance, color temperatures makes a difference. And I'm just doing it a little bit. Basically, you don't want to move more than 20% in any direction, or it starts to lose pixel information. And then I can play with the shadows, and I usually just push the shadows a little bit cooler with the cyan and the blue. And then the highlights I push a little bit warmer towards the yellow and the red. Now you can always see if these do anything, if you like the adjustments, because it's kind of hard to tell as you're sliding things around. So I have my history open, and you can see what that color balance did. You can see what the levels did. That's what levels did, brighten it up. Color balance brings it more dimensionally in line with everything else. Then the last one, which you don't always need to use, but is sometimes needed, you have to select the layer, is hue saturation. So levels, color balance, hue saturation. This is what we were doing at the end of last class. It's what I'll continue to be doing through my different layers before I erase them. And this is the spectrum of the color. And it can be fun to really play wildly with this, but if you go too far, it will lose pixel information, right? It'll make everything kind of one note. And you just see, does it need to go a little bit this way or a little bit that way, or is it just fine? I'm just going to push it a little bit that way. All right, and now the saturation, that's the hue. Saturation is the color intensity. Do not take it all the way down to grayscale. We're not doing a black and white project, right? Or a grayscale project. But you can decide, is it a little too intense? Is it not intense enough? I'm actually going to just take it down a little bit. And now I'm happy with that. I go to the next layer, which is the beak. And I'm going to go through those same things. And because I was using the beak largely as the basis for this, I'm in pretty good shape. I shouldn't need too much. We might limit the highlights a tiny bit because we just want our creature design to be not have a lot of hot spots, not a lot of like solid whites or blacks, to be a nice middle ground exposure so that it can fit into different backgrounds and have its lighting adjusted. After levels, I go to color balance, start with midtones. I'm going to make it a little bit cooler in the midtones. I'm going to go to shadows, make those a little bit cooler. That's all looking pretty good. And then go to highlights and just make it a little bit warmer so that you have warm highlights, cool shadows. That's just classic color theory to round it out with the color temperature. And then hue saturation. I'm just going to take its intensity down a little bit because it looks a little fake because it comes from a model of a dodo rather than a real dodo. So if I just take some of that pink color down a little bit, that's going to feel more believable. And then the hue, do I want it to go more pink, more yellow, right about there. Again, I can use my history, and actually you can see how the color balance made a big difference there, making that all feel like it's one creature. Next I have the neck and these feathers. And notice I'm not doing any erasing or blending until I've made these colors and light levels match. So if you're on this step, go ahead and play with these adjustments along with me on yours. If you need to get to this step, because we want to get something turned in today, and then it's a pretty important deadline so that we have something to composite with proving ground number 1 that we'll be introducing next. You want to find your reference for your creature and put those together. And then as soon as this video is over, remember the videos are only 15 minutes, I can come around, get you caught up. I know the beginning of the semester can feel like a lot of information coming really fast. And you just have to hold on to it all and trust that through repetition it will make more sense. So I just did levels, now I'm going to do color balance. This is on the feathers coming into the neck. And these colorful feathers, this comes from a rooster. It's really interesting to see how those temperatures change, especially as I go from highlights to shadows, because you have warms and cools all in the same reference. And look how beautifully you can kind of push those in each direction. All right, now hue saturation. Always levels, color balance, hue saturation. And then if you need more, you start back at the top. You go back to levels. Take the saturation down a little bit, and I'm going to push. Ooh, I like that. The hue just to the left a little bit. So that now that those feathers kind of match the other colors in some of the other layers. All right, and then lastly, what do I have? Got these feathers behind. Now I'm going to wait on those because I can't see exactly where they're going to connect. So I'm going to mark that as red because I need to color correct that. And I'm going to go back up to the top. It's a good time to hit Command S and save. And now I'm going to start blending these edges. I have my tablet, which is very helpful, which allows me to do pressure sensitive erasing. But even if you're just using your mouse, remember I moved the eye from there to there. It's kind of creepy. But to blend, we simply use our eraser tool. We use it a pretty large size with a 0% edge softness. And then we start with a 100% opacity to get rid of the hard edge. But I've already gotten rid of the hard edge. Right? So then we can start blending with a lower opacity. I'm going to go really low. I'm going to go like in the 20s. So now that the colors match, these just fade on top of each other, these different textures. And it lets the color come through from the layer underneath a little bit. You decide where it's most helpful. Go even down a little bit less. Because I want some of the sharp edges of those quills, that fur. And then I can go to this layer that's overlapping, and I can start blending it in with those feathers behind it. And you can see how, since we got the colors and the levels to match, this is all going to feel far more believable. And now you can't really tell that those come from 3 different layers. And I get to decide where the edges are, how hard or soft they are. This is compositing. Maybe I'll bring a little bit of those pinks around the eye. And I'm not painting here. I'm just revealing from layers underneath. Because this bird looks like it'd be pretty patchy. So I can have like little spots. Just erasing low opacity from this layer.